How's it going, everyone? This is Let's Talk with JMO. I'm JMO, and we're here with John Napolitano, a coach from UMass. Actually, my personal coach when I was on the track team. How's it going?
What's going on, Jimmy?
How you been?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah.
Hanging in there.
So why don't we start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself and where you're from and how you got to be a coach
Sure.
at UMass?
Yeah, so my name is John Napolitano. I originally grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, and then went to college in New Hampshire. Actually, I went to a small school called Keene State College in New Hampshire. Did track there, and then kind of just fell into coaching. Just the person who was my coach ended up leaving and actually taking the coaching job at UMass, which is kind of my connection to UMass previously.
Okay.
Uh, and then from there, just weaved my way through like a bunch of different careers before I could actually be like a full-time coach. So this is my fourth year at UMass.
Okay. Oh, I didn't realize you started right around when a little bit before I got there.
Yeah, like honestly, like that time that you and I met in my office. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
remember.
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, that was probably like my fifth day working at UMass. Like
Oh,
I had
really? Oh my god, I
yeah,
had no idea.
yeah, that was like my first week. Like I hadn't even like when you came, you were probably the first person that ever came in my office. I hadn't even like unpacked anything. Like that was just
Wow,
like
that's
literally
crazy.
one of the first weeks I was there. Yeah.
I remember being shit scared walking in there because I had no
You looked
idea.
pretty terrified. Yeah, you
Yeah.
looked pretty terrified. You were like, wow, this guy I think
Well,
this
you were so serious. And I was just like, I didn't know that like you goof around at all. You were like dead ass serious. I was like, I'm like shitting my pants right now.
gotta set the tone early. Gotta set the
Oh
tone
yeah.
early.
Honestly, I loved being on the team there. That
Yeah.
was like a team experience different just because the way the practices and everything were regimented with the working out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was and I especially at that time because we had to make like so many changes, right? Like there had
Hmm.
never been like a full time just throws coach before, and like we had to shift a lot of attitudes from like kids who had been there previously, and then we had this like new group of like really really young
Oh
talented
yeah.
kids, right? That like so it was just like this mesh of like 500 different things going in a million different directions. It was a pretty stressful time, but honestly, like I love that.
Oh yeah.
Like that was great. We were like on a fine line of like chaos that whole year, but like we rode that line really really well, and like rebuilding and like starting programs and traditions and stuff like that. Like that stuff's awesome. Like I
Oh
love that.
yeah. And so do you guys still why don't we I don't know if you're at liberty to talk about this or if you do want to talk about it, but like with your training program,
Hmm.
from the weight room to the pool, that
Yeah.
the pool is something you introduced to me that I had no idea was as important as it is.
Yeah.
How'd you come
Yeah.
to like learn about all that too?
Yeah. So I think if you were to talk to a lot of other coaches, and not even just like track coaches, they probably don't use the pool as much as I do, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
um, that's something that the pool is pretty. It's actually a pretty scary like training apparatus, is how I would describe it, right? Like if you screw it up, you screw it up bad, like
Yeah.
because if you go too hard in the pool, you're trashed, right? Like you can't do anything else, as you know,
Oh
because
yeah, exactly. Like that first few weeks of getting used to it,
yeah,
it was
right.
something
So,
else. Like even
yeah,
like because you think like, oh, we do a few laps, but no, we're in there like for 45 minutes, like
sure,
straight going.
yeah.
When you first get into that, you're just not ready
No,
to.
no, and I knew that, right? Like I was like, yeah, this is just gonna, and we planned for it on the day before and the day
Hmm.
after, like that. But like it was something that we had a group of kids, and honestly, like at my previous school where I was coaching,
Hmm.
there wasn't even a pool on campus, right? So like I didn't have access to
Oh,
the pool, and where I first started coaching at Keene State, where I threw, like we'd use the pool like twice a month, or it was really what did it for me was like when we started at UMass, I had a group of really, really talented kids who just weren't in shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we had to start somewhere, right? And we had to I had to like level off that baseline and get everybody in better shape. And like, wow, I remember when like I came and started, like even on like my tour, like when I had my interview and stuff like that, I had no idea there was a pool in the cage, right? Like I didn't even know. And then like when I started, talking with Coach Jackson, was my boss. He's like, yeah, there's a pool down there. I was like, whoa, we got a pool?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, it's old and like it's disgusting in there. I'm like, I don't care. It's a pool, like it's a working pool. Like they clean it and everything. Like, yeah, nobody ever uses it. I was like, oh, that thing's getting used. Let me tell you. But for me personally, like when I first started getting more serious into coaching, and then started to really start to think about training and right training and stuff like that, I spent some time at the U.S. Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista. I was given an internship out there where I could spend the summer and really learn.
Huge.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. I was, I don't know, like 24, 25 years old, just starting coaching really. And to get to go out there and do that, like ahead of the London Games and stuff like that, it was fantastic. And I got to see, not just a lot of the, when I was out there, I'd see what the throwers were doing and go watch sprints practice, stuff like that. But like, I also went and I saw what the swimmers did. And I saw what badminton players were doing. That just everything is out there, right? And these are phenomenal athletes in their respect, the gymnasts and everybody, right? So to get to go out there and be, to see that and see how people use the pool or use anything really, right? Like I don't want to come off as the guy who like, oh my God, if you come to UMass and throw, you're going to have to be an Olympic swimmer. It's like, no. We got some kids who drop like rocks in the pool, right?
Awesome.
Like you've seen some bad swimmers, right? But what it can do for you is huge, right? What it can do for you at such like a low impact is huge. And for us bigger guys and gals who are throwers normally, it's big. But also, I mean, and you felt it too, right? The mobility you get out of it, the shoulder mobility for like javelin throwers or whatever, right? Yeah. Like it's huge. It's huge, and it just opens up things that no other training apparatus can do. So, like I said, I've coached at other places where we've never been in a pool, right? Yeah. Like it's just, we didn't have one. But
and that's probably where your like extreme stretching regimen came from too, is
not
having
absolutely.
the pool, I think. But I mean that's another thing you do that like is pretty huge in terms of you remember I didn't stretch at all before.
Yeah, you were like a vending machine that couldn't like even like tilt in any direction. You were just like a stiff as a board. Yeah, and that's very common, right? And I think one of the things that we do pretty well is injury prevention, right? Yeah. Like we train pretty hard, but our guys we avoid major injuries, I think, because we're flexible and mobile and strong and things like that. So we even like with freshmen and stuff like that, like they could be very talented throwers. They could throw very far, but when they get here, that first semester, they're going to feel it, right? Oh, yeah. Like, because it's training like they've never had before.
But there's like a level of respect that goes along with that too. Is just like that initiation, especially like coming into the team. You feel good afterwards. It's like one of those things that like it kind of really fucking sucks going through it at first, and then you're just like, when you get through it, you're just like, oh shit, I kind of love this.
Yeah, and you also like the amount of self-confidence that brings, right? Oh, like because we lay it out there. Like I lay it out there. I tell everybody, hey, this is what we're gonna do, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is how we're gonna train, and I tell them that when they come on like recruiting visits and stuff too. Like this is what we do. This is how we train, and this is very challenging. And then once you've actually been through that and actually completed, the tough training cycles and all that stuff that we do, you build a lot of self-confidence in yourself. Like people actually don't know how hard they can push themselves. I tend to think that people can be pushed way harder than they believe in themselves. You know what I mean? And 100%. I keep pushing that button as hard as I can. Like that's just how I operate.
it's funny because I listen. So for me personally, since I'm being out of the track program and everything, I kind of fell off the whole working out train. And the main thing I miss is literally, for one, having something to be working towards. That's where like
Yeah.
most of
Yep.
my effort in the gym. Like I've always had a sport. I was a 3 sport athlete in high school, and through
Hmm.
all of college, I was pretty much an athlete. I did track at HCC and then came to you guys. Um, so I always had that like the reason to be working out, and that's where I find
Yeah.
most of the hardship now. That's why I thought about getting into like maybe like doing, because we both know I wasn't really a track athlete. I was just kind of an athlete in
No,
general.
you were just an athlete.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
why I was
You were just,
like I was mainly a football player and just kind of doing
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But
No, I could see that for sure. Yeah.
yeah, so that's why like personally I'd like to get into like jujitsu or some sort of martial art to have like that push and like a coach too, because having
Yeah.
having someone to push you further.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, and even myself personally, right? Like just, like working out and training and stuff like that. Like when I graduated, I was still throwing and, still doing those things, but then you start to get older and then you got to do more responsibilities or you got to,
Hmm.
you got to do other things.
Yeah.
And then you do that less. And then when you start to do it a little less and you're not as good at it anymore, you're like, this just isn't the same. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard to take a step back
Exactly.
and
And there's not like that level of competition that like also is
yeah,
driving.
that's tough too, especially in the track and field world. Like they started doing more like masters stuff but like I've been to a couple of those things and it ends up being like, some guys who are taken kind of seriously, then a bunch of guys like, oh, I haven't touched this in years. I can't wait to get out there and do it. And it's like, yeah, it's just a level of like, novice that I just don't want to be a part of
Yeah.
when you know what I mean? Like it's like, I
Understandably.
just don't want to do crap like that. Like I want to go and like beat some people like the old days, you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
But it's, but you're right. Having like that person who's like, literally it's their job to like push you, right? Like
Hmm.
that's hard to find. So when you're
Exactly.
done, when your career is over, basically that's over unless you're still training
Yeah.
for something like professionally, like
Yeah.
especially in the track and field world, like that's basically over once your college career is over.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I tell that to the guys, to the team all the time. Like this is like a really good opportunity that you have, right?
Yeah,
Like you
exactly.
once this is over, it's over. Like this is it. This is your chance to do it. So I understand, right? I feel you on the
Hmm.
the having a coach or even like myself, like just how do I push myself physically to be able to be even close to what I was before, on top of you
Have you
know
have
having
you
a family, having
considered
all.
doing like jujitsu or Krav Maga or anything? Like once
No,
studios and stuff open back up?
no. So that was never really
Cup of
my
tea.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never. I think there's to be honest, I think there's like a certain level of like discipline that I lack to do something like that. You know what I mean? Like that, I've never been down that road. For me, it was always like like track, and I played football too, but it was
Hmm.
always track, and then like we were talking earlier, like things to occupy my mind, like like chess or strategy, things like that. Like
Yeah.
that's always been more something that I could get down with. When it comes to like things outside of that in athletics, like I don't want to say I don't care, but it's just it never
Yeah.
fired me up like throwing did.
Yeah. That's see, I'm like the opposite. Is like track is more of like one of my things that's like I love it, but I'm more interested in, you know, not not outside of sports, but in sports hitting
Yeah,
people. That's
right.
like
No, no,
that's
no.
why I played
Yeah,
lacrosse. That's the
yeah,
only
sure.
reason I played lacrosse.
Yeah, and
And that
honestly,
team
especially
aspect
like
too.
yeah, and especially like for you, right? Like I always viewed you as like you use like javelin as your way to become a better athlete, right?
Mhm.
Like because that's what you wanted. I always wanted to be like just a good enough athlete so I could just throw because I liked throwing.
Yeah.
Like that was what I am, right? And that's like if you were to look at the team, that's probably where like I think the team now is probably they want they're probably more so than me. Like they want to be in way better shape even than I ever was.
Oh, okay.
And they want to throw.
Yeah,
You
I
know
was
what I
gonna
mean?
say I feel like the difference between me and many of the people there was like they were actually track athletes.
Yes, yeah, and I think at the end of the day that's what ended up separating everybody the most,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we had a crew that like you looked at it and you're like, okay, like this group is incredibly athletic and they're just throwing because that's the way they can get on the team versus this group is incredibly athletic and they're like insanely hungry to throw.
Exactly. It's interesting to like kind of after I don't know what has it been like a year and 2 years almost. It's almost been two
Yeah,
years actually.
yeah, yeah. It's been a
Um,
couple.
that's like stepping back now is like in seeing that dynamic and actually talking about it is actually interesting because it really kind of pops. And it's cool to actually talk to someone that's the opposite of pretty much me, in
Yep.
terms of like that viewpoint.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, like I said, when you came on and where that group was, right, we
Mm-hmm.
were just kind of like so young in what we were trying to figure out, and like it was, it's just it was a very different group, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, and it took a lot of work, but it's boiled down to like what it is now, and what it is now is very, very good.
Okay.
Like I'm super bummed we didn't have an outdoor season last year. I'm like super bummed we're not having a season right now. Obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic. There are more important things, but like
Mm-hmm. But still.
it's been like 3 years of work to get to where we are now, and I really liked the direction we're going, like
Yeah.
a lot. So, um, obviously anybody can just get up and say that, but I'm excited for when we get start again because
It's gonna be
this is,
something different.
yeah, yeah. I truly, truly believe that. Like
I
I have,
I do too,
I,
just being someone that like has seen the whole process.
yeah, yeah,
And what's exciting though is I think it can be done almost easier the next time you have to once these people graduate because you already have
yeah.
that groundwork laid.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah. And honestly, so that'll be interesting for me because if you kind of look at my career, I've basically been at like three places for like 4 years, right?
Mhm.
So like I've never actually stayed anywhere past that point,
Mhm.
um, because it was always financial. I was never really like a full time getting paid just to coach, so I was always just moving on to the next opportunity kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and it'll be, I don't want to say, it definitely won't be easy. It's never easy, right?
Mhm.
If you think it's easy, then you're going to lose, right? Like
Oh yeah.
it's a tough job. But I'm thinking it'll be easier because of exactly what you're talking about, right? You have the guys here who set the tone for the younger guys, and as long as you keep feeding that system,
Yeah.
it should continue to feed itself, right?
Yeah,
Or
it's like
weed
a
out the people.
self-fulfilling thing almost.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think when I got here, it was like I did not have a hard time figuring out who were the people who were going to get it and who were the people who weren't.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'm wrong about that when I get a job, I get there, I meet the
Mhm.
people, I talk to them, I'll have that first meeting like we had, and they'll walk out
Yeah.
of my office and I'm like, yeah, I don't think this is going to work out. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And sometimes I'll be wrong. I was 1,000% correct about every kid at UMass when
Yeah.
I'm not like gloating. Like it wasn't hard. It was not hard to figure out who got it and who didn't.
Mhm.
And when you go into a situation like that, and I think this isn't just like track coaching. I think
Any
this is real work.
situation. Yeah.
Any situation where you're working, even your part, like you ride with the people who are gonna back you up
Exactly.
and want to be better. And we had a good crew of kids actually who wanted that, but just never got it before,
Mhm.
right? Like because before I got here, Coach Jackson was coaching the throwers, and he's also coaching like 600 other athletes and event groups, and there's only 24 hours in the day, and it's not easy. Even just
No, not at
the
all.
people who coach like multiple event groups and are coaching like crazy amount of athletes, like hats off to you. I don't know how you do it. Like even for me, just coaching the throwers, you guys give me enough headaches as it is.
Yeah.
don't want any more. Like it's a lot. It's a lot. If you get really,
Exactly.
it becomes a lot. But there was a group here that wanted more, and when I told them, I was like, I'm going to give you more than you can possibly handle.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, "Ooh, cool. This will be good." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Well, I'm glad you think that way because this is what's happened." So, but like I said, it's taken 3 years of. I
Yeah.
think the best analogy, like I said, is just boiling it down, right? Trying to get it to
You
where we
have the
are right
best
now.
of the best where they need to be.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of it, when they got here, they weren't the best.
No. It
That's
takes
for
lots
sure.
of time. Lots
Yeah,
of
yeah,
time.
and that'll always be our model, right? We're never gonna get like the 5-star kids, or
Mm-hmm.
like it's always gonna take some extra work for us. And honestly, I love that, right? Like I friggin' love the grinders and the kids who come and just bust their ass and don't stop until you tell them to stop. And those are the kind of kids I love to work with.
It's kind of funny because it's like a Hallmark type uh, story that you see in every type of football movie or sports movie in general. It's never, and it's true though. That's a thing. It doesn't matter if you're talented. If you're not putting in the work, you're not gonna be the best. You can be the best
Yeah,
at the start, but if you're not putting in the work that you need to and going that extra mile or pushing that fourth quarter.
right, right. Yeah, that is especially for, and you bring up like like football and like basketball movies. They have all these all those movies out there, and the plot line's pretty similar in all of them. And it is true. But I think it's even more so for a sport like track and field, where like when you're competing, only a couple like I tell this I tell this to the javelin throwers all the time. Like, I think you guys are nuts. You're training year round to throw like 5-6 times.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're literally putting in like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year round to throw in like 5, 6, 7 track meets.
It's
Like,
nuts.
it's crazy. Like, it's 20. Like, you're talking about like 25 throws. You're putting in, like, you know what I'm saying? Like that.
A
This
year.
is yeah,
Let's
yeah.
explain this to the audience because whoever's
Okay,
watching might not be
that's
um,
true. That's very
someone
true.
of track and field.
Yeah. So javelin is like, for me, I coach indoor track and outdoor track, right? So if you're a thrower and you do indoor and outdoor, you're basically competing from December through May, right? Like, that's generally what ends up happening with the majority of the throwers on the team. It's a long season. It's a long grind. It's much longer than any of the other
Outdoor.
sports, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the people who just throw javelin, there is no indoor javelin, right? So that's just an outdoor event. There's a couple of events for track and field that are kind of outdoor only. For throwers, the one is javelin, and it's a very stressful event on your body. So it's not something that, even if you could do all the time, you'd want to do all the time, because you'd
Exactly.
break down your
You're
arm, your
tearing
back.
up your shoulder.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
like this all.
what happened to Johnny Long? He had
Yeah,
the Tommy
he had
Johns.
Tommy John.
Yeah.
Well, so he didn't actually have the Tommy John. So he tore the ligament in his elbow his freshman year, before I got to UMass, and I inherited him with a torn UCL ligament.
Okay.
So they opted to not do the surgery. 90% of the time when you tear your UCL, they do the surgery. Like, because the surgery is so precise now, your UCL actually ends up being stronger than it is naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, like, most of the time people opt to do the surgery. Again, I don't know why, but they did not opt to do the surgery for him when it happened his freshman year. They wanted to go more like rehab and everything else around it stronger. So that was something like, you saw Jimmy with the way we had to train him. He was by
Yeah.
far our best javelin thrower, but he was very, very limited in what he could do, because any one throw could have just snapped it and
Yeah.
then career over, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's it. So, and he was a strong, fit kid, could swim really
Oh,
well.
yeah.
Like,
I mean, he was
there
on the
wasn't,
swimming team in high school. He talked about
yeah, it
that.
wasn't really like limitations for him. It's just one of those things where this event can destroy you physically, right?
Oh yeah.
But most of the people who were on the team, and this isn't like everywhere, but most of the people who were on the team at UMass and through javelin, we're just javelin throwers. They didn't do another event.
Mm-hmm.
So when me and you were talking about people who are just training year round, do you guys train? I mean, I gave you guys summer training, you guys had winter training, we practiced all fall. You guys were training, going through this for the whole year to go to just outdoor meets. And outdoor meets in New England are generally not the nicest weather all the
they
time.
Suck.
This isn't like Miami Beach or anything, right?
No.
Like it's cold, it's windy, it's not the best conditions to throw the javelin. So you, like I said, you guys are training year round to throw in a few meets in April, hopefully to qualify for some championship meets, to throw a couple times in May, and then that's the season, right? That's it. So I've always, I mean, personally, like I've told you guys this many times, I think javelin throwers are insane, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think you guys are nuts to do all this work just for, but you know, I don't think anybody in our group ever wavered. Like they really wanted to go to the javelin, and they trained their ass off, and
mm-hmm.
you know, they want it just as bad, if not more, because they know how narrow their opportunities are, right? Like they know they got to be so precise, because when we get to the outdoor season, they got a handful of opportunities. Yeah. So I think that's something that we've done really well here with javelin throwers, and I probably didn't have as much success in previous places with that, but here it's something that we've, and again, it feeds into the same thing we're talking about, the senior leaders, like, you know, like when we had Johnny Long on the team,
mm-hmm.
him telling you guys all the time, like, listen, like you guys want to, you know, be jackasses in October, that's fine, but then you're going to suck in April when you need to throw.
Yeah. And though there's a whole nother level of stress for javelin throwers too, which is that if you mess up one of the few times you have to throw, you mess up your form, because what people don't realize about javelin throwing is it's a very meticulous thing. Every fine little detail you have to be paying attention to. Your angle of release, the way your footwork is, the way you turn your torso. It's all very implemental to how far you're throwing this giant spear.
Absolutely.
So,
and you're doing that wrong. Woo,
especially we've had teammates where in practice, when we were doing our where we try throwing our hardest right before we shut down for winter because you can't throw outside.
Right.
They had those moments. Certain people had moments where they just got in their own head, and that's something you have to train for too, which people don't understand.
Yeah, I would say that the mental strength and the mental fortitude it takes to be a track athlete is pretty high. Mm-hmm. Like if you could have all the tools in the world, if you're not mentally strong, it's not really going to matter what you have physically, right? Like we've had some head cases come through and graduate and even leave the team because they probably don't have it, right? But it ends up being just as crucial a part as your physical shape, really. Like mm-hmm. you have to be mentally strong to be a track athlete.
Have you ever thought, this is kind of out there, but have you ever thought about like doing mandatory like meditation in terms of like trying to clear people's minds and stuff like that? Because I remember you did bring us into your office a few times and show us like motivational stuff and things like that, which I actually have some videos I definitely want to send to you to check out because they're pretty fucking awesome for motivation stuff.
Great. I mean, yeah, I love that stuff. I still do that with the group.
I love that.
I feel like that's always helpful. So for me, and to answer your question about like meditation and stuff like that, yeah, I've thought about it many times. It's kind of, when it comes to stuff like that, I am always of the personal belief that if people do that stuff on their own, it ends up being way more meaningful than mandatory. I take it and like shove it down their throat, right? So it's, I mean, honestly, like let's an example of that I would use is like let's go back to like stretching, right? Like when we started, like I told you guys, like, okay, you guys gotta be disciplined in your stretching. You gotta stretch when you wake up. You gotta stretch before you go to bed. You gotta warm up properly at practice, and then I allowed the first like month of practice to happen, and I'm like, these kids are not stretching, and it's so obvious that I'm gonna like kill somebody, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not even up for debate that these kids, right? And then a couple times I have to flip my shit or freak out at practice, or whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
throw the chair like Bobby Knight or whatever, just to get you guys to stretch or whatever I had to do to get it to work, right?
Yeah.
And I would do that, and then I'd come back the next week, and I was like, these fucking sons of bitches, they're still not stretching. Like, how was I not clear last week when literally my hair was on fire? And this is the stuff you learn in the evolution of coaching. It's much better to go to the guy who everybody on the team looks to, or the girl
Exactly.
everybody on the team looks to, and be like, listen, I need you to do this, and then I need you to bring your teammates with you, right? Because that's always way more meaningful.
100%.
And that'll always get the job done more than me. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, you have to do this. You have to do this. So when it comes to like, meditation and stuff like that, I think I would say we dabble in that a little bit with our stretching, right? Like we do a lot of controlled breathing. We do a lot of stress mediation in that sense when we're doing our stretching. But there's only so much stuff you can kind of shove down your athletes' throats before it starts to get thrown back up in your face, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just going to backfire. Now, if I had a group where I thought that I needed that more, I would absolutely do that. Like, no doubt about it. And I would take away the stretching or take away the pool or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I would balance that out for sure. But like I said, there's a line to where you can go as far as like where you push that stuff. And recently I think that we've, like, as far as like stress management and stuff like that, I think the group is in like a way better place. Like, I think if you came to a practice now as compared to where it was like a couple of years ago, I think you would see that it's way better than it was.
Understandably. It was definitely up in the air when I was there.
Absolutely. And you know what? I wanted it to be up in the air at that point. I wanted everyone, like I told you, we rode that line of chaos, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I thought in that conflict, really, everybody grew a lot. It's not something that's sustainable for a long time. That's
definitely
for sure.
Not.
But at that year, I was like, you know what? I remember vividly having conversations with Coach Jackson and Coach Julie, who was the head women's coach, just like, this is what we're going to do this year, and it's going to be tough, and maybe you'll get some. I told him, I was like, maybe you'll get some complaints. I don't know. Like, we'll see. But like, I remember telling them both, like, I know why I'm doing this, and I'm not doing it for fun because it's going to make my life a lot harder too. But it's something that we just got to do to grow right now. And honestly, going back and thinking about it, and even talking to like Coach Jackson, Coach Julie, they were like, nobody complained. Like nobody complained. Like they were. I mean, you guys complained. Like, you guys were pissed at practice. You guys complained at practice, but nobody ever like went to Coach Jackson or like went to Coach Julian. You got to get rid of this guy. He's crazy. At the end of the day, it was like you were talking about earlier when you left practice. Like, wow, like I accomplished something today that was tough.
That's what I miss. Like, right now, I'm furloughed. I actually have a job interview at 22. I didn't tell you that. At 22 News. So we got a job interview, which is exciting.
Ooh, sweet.
But
22 News in Springfield?
It's in Chicopee, but yeah.
Chicopee, yeah. Sweet.
So actually I applied for 2 jobs. They didn't tell me which one that I was interviewing for, which whatever.
Job is the one.
Yeah. Exactly. But that's like the main thing. Other than doing podcasting, I've been trying to get a stream up and going for it's video games, but that doesn't give me fulfillment like getting that hard work.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, honestly,
you can make a lot of money doing that, but
sure, yeah, but
it's just not fulfilling.
No.
Like, that's what I miss the most is working my ass off to like feel that fulfillment at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's. I talk about this a lot with even like some of like my friends who are not in the coaching field at all, right? Like just friends of mine from high school and college.
Yeah.
And we'll be catching up because of the pandemic, everything slowed down a little bit. You can talk to people more, blah, blah, blah. And I told, they're like, oh, what are you doing now? Or, things like that. Oh, you're still coaching track and stuff like that. I'm like, oh yeah, like it. Because honestly, I just being the person who gets to shape that for everybody, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That struggle to get to fulfillment thing, like
Yeah.
that's the part that's great. Like, like last year before the pandemic happened, like the women's team won the indoor championship for the A10s. They hadn't won it in a while, and it was a full team effort. It was great. Awesome to be a part of. Not the most exciting part of my job. Like, I like winning. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Winning is fun.
Winning
Winning's
is very
fun.
fun.
Winning is a lot of fun. It's definitely better than losing, right? But not what gets me out of bed every morning to go to those early lifts every day, right? Like
And
that's
early.
not what.
Those are early.
Yeah, those are early. And you guys are living on campus. It's closer for you. I gotta get my ass out of bed and drive my ass.
Oh yeah.
To the lift in the morning. Park in lot 33, like freaking 8 miles away.
The worst was walking from Sylvan. Oh my god.
Oh yeah,
During the ice.
I told you. I remember when you told me where you live, and I was like,
that's a bad idea. And I was like,
that's tough. That sucks. Yeah,
I'm gonna try it out.
You might have been closer in South Hadley than you were.
Oh my god, I know.
But I mean, like
bad mistake.
But that's the part of the job that like I'll never get tired of, right? Like that's the part that fulfillment part, and I miss it personally as an athlete, like I do, but
it's
like,
the next best thing to be shaped.
Yeah, like now I'm the guy shaping it, right? Like now I'm the guy creating the controlled experiment for everybody to get better, and I mean. I can't see myself doing anything else. Like I've done a lot of different, like we talked, you and I have talked about, like my career track. Like when I graduated, I got my degree in communications and sports journalism and worked in that field for 5-6 years before I ended up really, really getting into coaching. So like, I've weaved through that field for a while because I thought that's what I wanted to do. But then once I really started doing this, I was like, there's no way I could do anything else. Like this, just no way.
Understandably. Going back to the meditation thing, I did have a comment on that. I think you're 100% right with not just college kids are stubborn and pains in the ass. So unless you have a leader like that. Yeah, well, I've been there. And it's just like it's like one of those things like you feel like, oh, I could do it. Or I could go hang out with my friends or whatever. Or I living in dorms.
Right. Or I could go get food truck. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just like.
Yeah, it's a balance.
Growing up and like. Because you're at a different. Obviously, you're older than everyone else. So it's like you're at a different maturity level that like this stuff. That's why looking to the captains. That was something like. I have a personal story. I was a captain for football when we had 4 captains. And. In the winter, we ended up not. My junior year, we got told we were going to be captains next year. So no one ever did like winter lift program except the seniors every year. So me and my friends, what we did literally was we did not do winter sports. Instead of doing indoor track, what I did was we did a weight room thing, and after people saw us in there every day after school doing it. And eventually we'd go weight room and then a ladder session to train footwork. And we did that for maybe a month, and we'd had like 3 or 4 kids come. And then by the end of the winter season, we had at least half the football team there.
Yeah, right.
Like, going.
Yeah, it ends up being like, monkey see, monkey do.
Exactly.
Definitely.
And like you just need someone that you can look to and be like, yo, you need to do this.
You absolutely got to do this. Yeah, and I think we have a decent balance of that in the crew now.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And actually now, like, if you're the person who doesn't do those things, because we talk about I spit ad nauseum, right? What you do outside of practice mirrors what you're going to be able to do in practice, right? Like, practice is not just 2 hours a day; it's every hour of the day. Are you sleeping? Are you hydrating? Are you stretching? Are you eating? Are you doing your homework? Like, if you're mediocre in the classroom, you're a mediocre thrower too. Like, you can't. I've always been of the belief you can't allow mediocrity in your life in any way, shape, or form if you're going to be successful. Like, that's just period, right? You can't just be basic at this and then expect to be an Olympian.
Yeah.
Olympians don't think like that. Like
No.
they're excellent at everything they do.
It's there's this saying, there's two sayings. One of them is, who's the guy? There's a huge speaker that talks about, if you want to be successful, you got to be you got to want to be more successful than you want to breathe. I don't know if you've heard that one. I'll have to send it to you.
I haven't, but I don't disagree. Like
it's pretty intense. He talks about it. And then there's this other one is, if you want to take the island, you better burn the boats, because the human mind will take the easiest way out.
Absolutely. And that's, and I go to, coaches conventions all the time. And sometimes I'll go and there'll be this really, old established coach who's won national champions, an amazing coach. And they start off with like, well, back in my day, we didn't have this problem. It's like, yes, you did. Like, yes.
You just didn't recognize it.
This is what This is what coaching is, right? Coaching is people, is this generation more lazy than the generation was before than it was before? I don't know, right? I'm not going to measure that. But I do know that our profession of coaching is getting people to buy in to do something that they think they want to do, but you got to make sure that they actually really want to be able to do it and follow through. Like that's how you're going to build a successful program. And and again, this isn't just coaching. This is how you're going to build a successful
business
team, business. This is how you're going to be successful in your life. If you want to just like nod your way through life after college because you think you're done with the work, you can do that, right? Like that is,
you definitely can.
So you could join the herds of people who do that, right? It's just not something that I'm ever going to allow on my team, and not something I want to be a part of, because the way I view my profession is like, I don't get paid a hell of a lot of money, right? This is not, I'm not rolling in cash and driving Lexus and living in mansions, and that'll never be in the cards for me in my profession. And that's fine. Like, I'm okay with that because I get the fulfillment of the work. Like, exactly. That's more important to me. Could I make more money if I worked for Amazon? Probably. Right? Like, yeah. I probably could. I don't know. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But I probably could. But that's not what's important to me. And if I'm going to put in all this work, and it's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
During the track season, we work a lot.
I mean, you're there all day. It's more than 8 hours. It's got to be more than 8 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no such thing as it. In the summer, you get 8-hour days, like when no one else is around. Yeah. But like the rest of the year, it's way more than that. And if I'm going to put in all that time and be away from my wife and my child and my family and other things that I could be doing, then everybody else better be all in too, right? Oh, yeah. Like that's always the frustrating part about getting somewhere and having people who don't believe the way you believe, right? Like, or don't think like the way you do. It's like, listen, like this is my level of dedication. If you're not like up here above that, then just go. Like, I don't care. Like, when I got at UMass, I kicked some kids off the team who were very, very good.
Very good. But they weren't there for the dedication.
No, they were just like, oh, I'm just going to show up when I want to show up. I'm just going to do what I want to do. It's like, yeah, you can't do that. That's not in the card. I don't care who you are.
That's the hardest hurdle I've kind of had personally outside of college, not having like a coach or technically the path I'm trying to take is I don't have that person over my shoulder telling me what to do like a boss, because I'm trying to do my own like production stuff.
Right. So then this is where and this is where I would push back and say, guess what? You are the boss now, champ.
Exactly.
Like
that's the hardest part.
Absolutely. And you know what? It probably took me too long to figure that out. Like I was not the guy who graduated from college, had it figured out, and hit the ground running right away. I mean, I don't even think I still have it figured out now, right? Like it's the door is still evolving there for sure. It's just always moving. But I feel like, especially now, right? And I'm not saying that because of the pandemic or whatever, or because of the economy, or because all that add on to this too. But the way the world works now, even more so than it did, 15 years ago when I got out of college, the way it works now, if you're not one of the kids who has it figured out and hit the ground running,
Oh, it just cut out
You almost
there.
have to grow.
You just cut out
Oh,
right as you were about to say the important part of what you were trying to say. Do you want to
oh.
say that again?
Can you,
Um,
am I back?
you're back now. Yeah, I think you might have hit something on your desk or
Oh,
something, and it canceled out the audio.
huh. That's weird.
It
All right.
sounds good now.
Yeah,
So
I'm
you're
here. Can you can
so
hear me?
you're saying if you
Okay.
didn't
All right, good.
have it figured out right when you get out of college now, I mean, I think you're in
Yeah, I
a
mean,
rock and a hard place due to student loans and stuff like that. But what were you gonna say? It sounded like you looked like you were
absolutely.
saying.
No, I agree. That's exactly where I was going, right? If you don't hit the ground running now because of the financial implications that it takes to do this, then you're digging a very, very big hole that's going to take a long time to come out of. Like that's
Exactly.
just the long and short of it. And I mean, me personally, I'm going to be paying my loans back till I'm like 150 years old, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a good shot that I'm dead before I pay off all my loans, and that's fine because I don't want to give these suckers another dime. And you know what I mean? Like it's been a really, really big personal investment for me.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a kid who had, parents paying for my
Yeah.
college, or it was if
Same
it was like
here.
if you want to go to school, that's a good idea. My dad was like, it's like if you want to go to school, that's a really good idea. You're gonna have to pay for that on your own. Okay, no
Yeah.
problem, right? Like that's the way it's always been. But yeah, the financial burden is a big part of it, but also I think that the a lot of people are growing up earlier. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like people are becoming like more adult like almost at a much younger age now, and there are like I've seen it. I've had some people on the team where I'm like, maybe you should just like loosen up a little bit. You're like
Mm-hmm.
18 years old. Like you don't
Yeah.
have to be this perfect adult like tomorrow, but they feel the pressure to have to do that.
There's a pressure to it. I think it's also a side of social media. We get to this point where
Oof.
younger people are getting to the point where they think they're more mature than they are. So they're acting older, they're
Oh,
dressing older, this and that. But there's this
yeah.
weird backhand side to that people don't realize is they're not morally where they need to be to feel that old. They don't have the experiences to back
Yeah,
the things that they're trying to
absolutely.
portray. And that's something that's being discounted
Right.
in our
Yeah.
society right now, and that's pretty important to the whole thing of maturity is you need to have these tough morals that you've developed through your experiences to be able to make the right decisions. And that's something we've kind of thrown
Yeah,
to
and
the wayside.
I agree with that, and I think honestly, it starts with to me. I mean, personally, you know how I feel about saying the word try, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
don't
We
we
don't
don't
do that.
try. We do it or we do it or we don't do it, right? Like we've completed our task or we haven't completed our task, and that forces people to understand that we're not always going to be successful all the time, and that failure is not the worst thing that could happen to you, right? If you fail at something and then quit or dismiss it or pretend it didn't happen, that's actually the worst thing that could happen. And that to me is what like plagues society more than anything. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can't wrap my head around that. Like I just can't personally.
That's a really big
Um,
point.
to me, yeah, to me personally, like, and I see it all the time. Like high school coach will call me, hey, I got this kid, she's a star, he's a star, you got to come check him out. Okay, cool. Go to a track meet, watch him win an event by like 30 feet. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Then I watch him do the next throw, and like after he or she does it, she walks off, throws her javelin on the ground, ripping on her hair, freaking out, yelling back at her coach, and I'm like, I'm good. I don't need
Yeah,
that. Like
exactly.
that's the wrong. That mentality is just not going to work,
No.
right? And I see that more and more. And I agree with you about social media. But for me personally, like I said, it's a step even further back from that. The maturity part, the step back for me is how much reality are these kids actually getting with their living their lives through
I'm
social media,
I'm
right?
happy with what
And
you just said there.
and like how much like when something goes wrong, right? I see it all the time. Something goes wrong and then you just dismiss it, or it's like, it's not a big deal, or No, that didn't happen. Like they'll literally just deny it
Mm-hmm.
that it just happened in front of their face.
Yeah.
If you're somebody who can fail well, and what I mean by that is like get pushed to the point where you can accept failure as a learning experience or actually take that failure and double it down and do something better, then you get to the point where you are where I am right now. And I say that having been a person who has failed millions and millions of times in my life,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like I'm not joking, 3 days ago, I'm on the phone with a recruit. And one of my favorite questions to ask recruits is, give me an example of a time where you failed and what you learned from it. And I shit you not, I'm talking to this kid. He's from New Jersey, like highly touted recruit. Like everyone's talking to this kid, everybody wants him. He literally says to me, he goes, when I put my mind to it, I've never failed. And I was like, wow. I was like,
yeah, I just
okay.
don't even know, like that.
I was like, wow, that's really great. It's good talking to you. Good luck. Boop.
Yeah, there's just like, I can see where he was coming from as thinking that was a good response, but
again, that's
a sense of arrogance, and it's just
that is now become an accepted mentality, right?
Yeah.
Like I agree with you. Like he was doing it because he thought, he's like, oh, if I talk about a time I failed, this guy's not going to want me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that might be something that other coaches might do. But again, that's just not
a mentality you can work with, honestly.
Nope. That's and again, a mentality that maybe other coaches can work with that. And they're like, oh yeah, I do this and I shape it and it changes it. Good for you guys. Like that's great. You found a way to do that. I think that's awesome. That's not for me. Like
no.
and again, you know how I operate.
Yeah.
You can't even say that word. You can't even say the T word in front of me without me flipping out, right?
No, not at all.
It's not acceptable. And the tryhards and I'm just going to go out there and give 110%. It's like, yeah, I know you are. You know how I know? Because everybody else is doing the same thing. That is an expectation that we have. That's not I'm going to go and give that extra 10%. It's like, great. If you don't, you're gone.
Yeah. We're just like you know what this program, along with like my other sports endeavors in life, how am I trying to word this is the real what? Where that kind of puts words to the whole everyone gets a trophy environment that we're in.
Yeah.
And
I agree. I mean,
no one wants to see a kid cry or whatever, but that's where the lifelong lessons you learn from accepting that you're gonna fail. And the other motivational things that I was telling you about is like that's something they talk about. Kevin Hart talks about it when he talks to Joe Rogan on the Rogan's podcast.
Okay, I heard that one. Yep. Yeah, I heard that one.
And that's one of my favorite podcasts he's ever done, just because lifelong lessons there. And when you spoke about talked is not the right word to use for that, but when you spoke about the perception of reality that kids are getting through social medias, people don't realize, like, you went to school for communication, so you understand this to a T. What you view on screen, for those that haven't gone to school and learned methods and psychological effects of media, when you're consuming media like the news, instead of being out and about among people, it shapes how you view the world, whether you know it or not.
Absolutely.
So there's
absolutely
when you're seeing the way our 24 hours news cycle goes is we're being fed things that people are going to watch. So we're getting
not news.
Yeah, it's not news. No, it's not.
It's not news. It's not news anymore. Like, and again, I'm a hardo old school like journalist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I went to school for, and that's what I thought I wanted to do. Like, be like a beat writer or something like that. Like, go to courts and cover. Like, that's what I thought I wanted to do, and I did that for a while. And I can't watch the news. It's not news. It's entertainment. It's
Exactly.
100%. And we were talking earlier about like shows and stuff that we watch. Did you ever
Newsroom,
watch?
my
Yes,
favorite show of all time.
yes,
Hands
great
down.
show,
Hands down.
great show.
If you
And
haven't seen
honestly,
it, watch it.
absolutely, like whatever you're doing, just turn this video off and go start watching Newsroom,
Yeah.
because the character of Will McAvoy is what this country needs so badly right now.
Beyond recognition.
Like this guy who's literally just going, and it's funny because when that show went off the air, it would have been like, if it was on the air now, it would have been a 10 times more interesting time for that show to be on, right? With like Trump
100%.
being president and all
Oh
that
yeah.
stuff. Like the way that we're just inhaling the lies of everything that's going on all the time. Like we need, like, I
Like
wasn't
actual
alive for Walter.
news.
Yeah, like I wasn't alive for Walter Cronkite or anything
I
like that,
wish.
but like, you could talk, like if you talk to like my dad or like my uncles and stuff, and how like people like that like literally stopped Vietnam and literally brought important issues. Like look, like couldn't we use somebody right now who was like that, who could take the issue of social justice and actually do something with it, right? And
Exactly.
right now we just have people who are on the air because they're on the air and they kind of look kind of nice, or they know somebody in the business and they've been in the job forever, and they read the talking points, and then they go to their Toys for Tots ad, and then there's the weather.
Yep.
And like my wife had you talk about how you have an interview with 22 News. We
Yeah.
had it on today. I was like, I understand we live in New England and there was a snowstorm coming, but we watched the news she had it on for like, I don't know, like a half hour. 28 minutes of it was on this snowstorm that was coming.
And it's just
I counted 28 minutes of the half hour. I was like, how many times can you talk about snow falling? Like, yeah, we get it. There's a snowstorm coming. Like, there's a lot going on in our country right now.
Oh yeah.
We're talking about snow, and this is like the eighth different graphic you showed me that tells me we're going to get 8 to 12 inches of snow. Okay, cool, got it. I got to get my shovel out. What's next?
Yep.
Right? Like,
Exactly.
what else? Isn't there some stuff going on in the country right now that we could talk about? Or I don't know. You can pull something out of a hat right now, and it'd be more important than how much snow we're going to get in Western Massachusetts. But when a snowstorm's coming, they crush you with, we're going to get a ton of snow, and then everyone flocks to the grocery stores and gets their canned vegetables and loaves of bread, and then that's how the world turns.
Well, you look at also why some of these social justice protests and movements are going, and why they seem to almost be doing nothing other than flooding social media with stuff.
Yes.
So
yes,
it goes to this. While there's backing behind it, in terms of where the way they're constructed right now is not effective because of their lack of journalistic approach. If that makes sense.
100%. I was hoping you were going to go there, because there is like financial backing, right? Like, because it's so easy to donate, and there's so much outreach, and people are on Instagram like, oh, I'll give $5 to this cause, or like it's not a financial issue at all. Like,
No.
these causes have tons and tons of money that they're getting, and I think it's great. Like, if you can raise money for something that you believe in, that's fantastic. But you're right. They take that money and then they turn into more things that are just perception than versus what's actual reality. They're literally taking it and turning it into more Instagram videos or pictures, graphics, when they could be using it, going and actually getting things done.
Yeah. So it's not just like the going to your congressman and such, but they're not giving, when I say journalistic approach, they're not giving a certain type of, they're not going and doing their research. So
Correct.
I'm all for to give example, the Black Lives Matter protests. I'm all for social change and betterment of police programs. I also support police, but there is things that do need to change. When you look at NFL the other day, they tweeted, I forget the name. I'm not going to go too specific, but about a guy it was one of the say their name things. But if you go and look at the body camera footage, the what this guy did to get like why he ended up getting shot. He was shooting
Yeah.
into random houses with his Glock, driving past, and then was Facebook Living that, shooting into
Yeah.
random houses. And then he gets run down by the cops because he was shooting into random houses with a Glock. That happened, but then he gets shot, but then the NFL goes and totes, say their name. Why aren't you doing that? I mean, they might have already done it with, for some reason, I'm bad with names, so his name's escaped me, but the guy in Michigan. George Floyd. Focus on these main stories where the actual problem's been happening and not just run-of-the-mill people that just have that skin color. Have a concrete story that goes along with it and focus on that, because when you bring people that not say that they shouldn't have been killed, because he probably shouldn't have been killed, he probably could have been taken without being killed, whatever. I'm not a cop, I don't have that backing, but take the important stories and not ones that can be used against you, because that just brings back the whole progress there.
I think that there definitely needs to be better research on that kind of stuff. I agree with you. For me though, like, I think that, personally, the way that I've kind of tried to involve myself in this is, I've been volunteering with I volunteered with Next Gen America through the election to try to get people to register to vote, and then also before that to try to get them. I was volunteering with Mass Vote to try to get people to actually be counted in the census, which the census is such a mess. Like it was done so poorly, and it was on purpose because the people in leadership don't want people to be counted in their cities right now, and it was done so horribly. But recently I've been kind of started to get more into the police reform and check the police.
Yeah.
And like, the things in there about, like police union contracts and things like that, the liberty that police officers get above and beyond what any other citizen, would get is pretty terrible. And, I have like friends of mine growing up are police officers, and I talk to them about this all the time, and they personally even are like, it's kind of crazy some of the liberties that a lot of our guys get, right? Like that, like it's kind of insane. And again, and it's funny that I feel like I have to qualify my answers and stuff like this, like saying like I'm not a cop, like I'm not against cops, like, but I feel the pressure. Like I'm not against police officers. I think it's a very, very tough job.
Yeah,
you couldn't pay me $10 million a year to do that job.
No,
that's just me personally. I would never want to do that. People who do it, but I think, more power to them. But I think that until we actually talk about, like, how about we talk about reforming what happens to a police officer after they've been on the job for 5 or 10 years? Because it's a tough job.
Oh, yeah.
It is a very tough job. And cops don't burn out. Why? Because they want to stay in the job. They want to collect their pensions, and they could just keep like going through the motions and keep working. So how about we help them?
Exactly.
And
so
how about we get them some, like I was reading an article the other day about, I believe it was, I hate to just misquote, I'm pretty sure it was Albuquerque, New Mexico, about a police officer who had been in like 4 officer involved shootings in like 18 months.
Yep.
That's a lot. Like, I mean, again, it can happen, like, okay, but like 3 of them happened in like a 10-day span, and 2 of them were called into question by like the district attorney of the area.
Yeah.
And because of the way the police union contracts are in New Mexico, he doesn't have to talk to anybody about any of those events until 60 days after the event.
That's ridiculous.
So literally, he can go, like if he shoots somebody on Monday, for the next 59 days, he could still go to work having not been able to have to talk to somebody about it. And like I said, there were 3 events that happened in like a 10-day span. When he goes to talk to somebody about event A, he does not have to talk about event B or C. You only talk about the singular event. Any other events that have happened don't get brought up.
That's extremely interesting. So I had Goylan Williams on my podcast. That was my second episode, and
Really?
he do you know him?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked, and we talked about how this was back right after George Floyd, I think.
Yeah.
And so we talked about, because I never really thought about the police unions, so I think that's a very interesting take that I think he's coming back on sometime soon. So I'll have to bring that in to ask him about that.
The website is called Check the Police. They literally have data for like, I think it's like 200 different police unions across the biggest police unions across the country, and they break it up like, there are other perks like, if somebody doesn't file a complaint within like 90 days,
statute of limitations.
Statute of limitations for cops is 90 days, no matter what it is.
Wow.
Or like the one that's locally here, and it's again not getting enough media attention. And I'm working with a couple local groups right now to try to help them get more media attention in Springfield. Okay, this is close to us in Springfield. It's there. They have the 90-day window. If nothing gets brought up in 90 days, then it gets swept under the rug. It happens all the time in Springfield.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
The town councilor or whatever, the councilman who wants to change that, and literally got the police unions to push back as far as saying, we'll go to 120 days. And that's, in their mind, a big win. Mm-hmm. Like, instead of just only 3 months to pull up charges on police officers, now we have 4 months.
That's ridiculous.
And in their minds, that's like, wow, we've pushed back the police unions on that. It's like that's not nearly enough. That's not nearly enough.
No.
If you've been traumatized by a police officer, there's a good chance you're not going to want to talk about it right away.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Like, that's what happens to people in trauma. We know that. Like, it's a well-known fact. And then the other thing that happens in Springfield too, and I found this fascinating, if while an investigation is happening, like they have internal affairs or whatever, doing an investigation, if you, the police officer who's being investigated, feel like you're not being investigated in an efficient manner or whatever, you can request a mediator to do it instead of internal affairs.
That's ridiculous.
And there are basically like 3 mediators, and you go back and you look, there are basically like 3 mediators in Springfield that do this, and they're all former cops.
Oh, okay.
They're all retired cops who are these mediators who are just like, yeah, no, that's fine. And then it just gets swept under the rug. Like nothing happens. So when we talk about the long and short of it, we were talking about, like the journalistic integrity of all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
When you put this stuff out on social media and it becomes a banner or, the say the name and all that stuff, right? That's, to me, those are the symptoms of the system, right? Like, because the system is set up so poorly, this stuff happens, and it's terrible. And we do need to remember those people that die because of it. But if you don't actually dig deep enough to find out where the issues are, and again, for me, this is where I believe the issues start, right? Mm-hmm. When you have police officers out there who just are accountable to nobody and can do whatever they want, then how is the system ever going to change? So then we need journalists to drill deep and to find this and to put it in front of people in an efficient way so they understand. That's like, to me, journalist's job has always been not, this is wrong, not to tell me that something is wrong.
No, to give me the cold, hard facts.
It's to give the facts and then allow the people to decide what needs to be done. And right now, we're not getting the first part of that from the journalists. We're not getting the facts. We're getting. It's funny. Before my grandfather passed away, like, oh God, it's been almost 10 years now. He's a very important man in my life. I was named after him, and he wasn't a journalist. He was a barber. But if anybody ever talked about him to you, he would tell you he was like the local politician because he was the barber. He cut everybody's hair.
So he
knew everybody.
That was going on.
Everything that was going on because everyone came in and talked. And he was a big newsie, right? Loved the news. But even when he got older, and he lived to be like 102 actually. But when
Wow.
he got older, he'd be like, I can't understand what these news guys are saying. You know why? They're talking too fast. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, that could just be because he's old or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then I actually sat down and watched the news one day and just followed how they talked when they came back from a break and like, oh, we're going to kick it over to so-and-so for the weather, or, oh, we got this event going on at a car dealership on Saturday. And then now for the heartbreaking news. And they would like literally zoom through in like 16 seconds as fast as they could possibly read about, the war in Iraq or a crisis or 9/11 or whatever, just zoom through that stuff and then go back to whatever was actually selling the ads, or, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like just paying the bills. And again, is it local news' fault that all this is happening? No, it's not. They're putting out a product that, like, their job is to get people to watch, or that's what they think their job is now, unfortunately. Whereas 20, 30 years ago,
it was a whole different game.
When everybody was literally just putting out the facts, it was a level playing field.
Yeah.
And now no one's putting out the facts, because if you put out the facts, you're boring, or you're a snob, or you're a liberal, or like they just throw these words out there and they just tag you with something, and then all of a sudden they're off the air quick. Yeah. So I understand that it's why it's being done the way it's being done right now, but like I said, the journalist in me just like cringes out.
Yeah.
The future. Yeah, it's not conducive to actually getting people the facts. It's conducive to getting people
to getting their eyes so they can
just want to grow their audience. It's all
the same thing
with
social media. It's getting you to look at the next
and you know what?
Thing on the screen.
Absolutely. And you know what? I respect social media for that, because that's literally its purpose, right? I have no but again, people are using that to try to get the news, and that's not new. No. But people don't, like we talked about, if it's being put on a screen in front of them,
it's outrage culture.
It's that now. That's what the news is. And 20 years from now, right? When I was in college, we had a professor. His name was Roger Martin. He was like the journalism 101 professor, and like if you got a C in that class, you were doing cartwheels because you were happy. It was impossible. The class was impossible on purpose.
Yeah.
And there aren't journalists like that anymore. There won't be people teaching like that anymore, because that's not what journalism is going to be anymore.
No.
So it ends up just being harder and harder.
So there's two things I want to touch on going out of this conversation is so when we're talking about journalism, you're right. It's like they're hurrying up to say nothing, which is the ad, which is deafening, because they're pretty much talking about nothing all day. Like you said, the weather is on for 28 minutes out of a 30-minute show.
Ridiculous. It was crazy. So I was like,
you got to think. We're going. You probably heard of Sujah Hawley, who is the director of the comm department. He ran one of the most influential classes I've ever had in terms of media literacy. This goes into my point. He talks about, we could go into public relations and how that's literally propaganda. The whole reason it's coined public relations is because the guy that invented propaganda couldn't call propaganda against their own country, so they called it public relations. We could go into all that. I don't know if we have time today, but because there's other things I'd like to touch on before that. But when we talk about media literacy, our education system has not caught up to technology. We're
living that right now.
Yeah.
We're living that, honestly, especially because of the pandemic and like trying to do even just like remote learning and stuff like that. Like, so I'm married to a teacher, right? Like the reason I'm in my bedroom is because my wife's in the office literally running middle school reading right now, right in our house. You're 100% right. And you know what? I don't even think it's 1950 in most classrooms right now, to be honest. Like we'd be lucky if it was 1950 in most classrooms right now.
People don't know what media literacy is.
No, they don't. And it's funny, when I was a kid, my dad always used to say, like when I was in like high school, he's like, so when do you take a class that teaches you how to do your taxes? This is literally what my dad would talk to me about. And I'd be like, I don't know. I don't think they offer that class. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you have to take a class. How else are you going to know how to do your taxes? I was like, I don't know. I'll just Google it. I don't, it's just, my dad was like, no, you have to take a class so you know how to do your taxes. So that way everybody knows how to do their taxes. There has to be a class for that. And I was like,
he's not wrong, I guess.
When he was a kid, there was a class to teach you how to do your taxes and to teach you there was a class to register you to vote when you graduate high school. So you could be in this, like, start voting. And there was, like, part of the class was also like signing you up for jury duty and, things like, can you imagine if there was something like that right now?
I mean, that's what Google's for.
No, but what I'm saying is, like, in high schools,
they
like,
needed that because they didn't have Google.
But I'm saying, like, but why don't we have that to get kids into the system, to teach them? Why don't we have a class on social media in high school right now?
That's a good point.
Why don't we have a class on social media in elementary school right now?
Why don't
you know who's better at social media than me? Everybody in kindergarten. Yeah. You know why? Because it's all they do.
Yep.
So why aren't we? And again, because we're so far behind, and all the teachers. And again, I'm in the living room listening to my wife on these Zoom calls of the teachers, and they're just like, I don't understand how to do this on Zoom, and I don't know how to do this on Google Classroom and all these documents. And I'm like, oh my God, this is. And so there's that challenge, but then there's also, if you continue to allow the kids to write the rules on what social media is, it's never going to be useful, because what kids are doing now is like I have an Instagram account. That's as far as I'm going to go, right?
Yep.
I'm not doing Snapchat. I have Twitter. I have Instagram. I've deleted my Facebook recently because it's just annoying me. But I have Twitter and I have Instagram. That's as far as I'm going to go.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started coaching, Snapchat became the big thing. Like, oh, coach, you got to get a Snapchat. I was like, I had it for like a week. I was like, this is dumb. I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
Now it's like the bar keeps moving. Now, like, I'll send things to kids on Instagram and they won't check it for weeks. And I'll be like, did you see that video I sent you on Instagram? Like, yeah, I don't go on Instagram anymore. Why? No. It's not the cool thing to do anymore. No. They've moved on to
TikTok,
Snapchat, moved on to TikTok. Right. That was the other one. Like, coach, you should get a TikTok account. No. Are you out of your freaking mind? No. Why would I don't need that. That's not for me. But again, the bar is just going to keep getting moved.
There's a reason for that, though.
Right. And then the older generation, with the ones who are supposed to be teaching or leading or however you want to put it, right? They're so far behind, or they don't even know. They don't even know it exists.
Yeah.
They don't even know what it is. They have no idea what it is.
It's too hard to keep up with the pulse.
Absolutely. I agree. But so that's where I think, again, this is where, if we're going to keep teaching just a unit of math, a unit of English, a unit of social studies, a unit of science, and keep teaching kids like that, in a world where this information is literally at their fingertips all the time, like it's right here, right?
Yeah.
Any second they want it, we're going to be so far behind. Yeah. Like it's not even up for debate.
So see, we're getting really good conversation here. So like, there's many points I want to hit on. In just the sphere of the little conversation we're having in this little part of the podcast is like, when you go to the reason that there's these new platforms popping up, what people don't realize is, so the goal of social media is to get eyes and attention. How do you get eyes and attention? You make a star. So they're in this system of trying to make people famous as fast as possible.
Yes.
So that's why we see it started off with YouTube, and it took PewDiePie, biggest YouTuber ever, has something over 100 million people subscribed to him. It took him, I think it's 10 years to get that far. Now, then we had Instagram, and people were getting to 1 million followers on Instagram really quick, and Twitter, and so on. Now we're at TikTok. People are getting to 10 to 20 million followers in 3 weeks. So it's whoever can make a star faster is going to get the most people to watch.
Yeah,
and it's the formula to become famous.
Yeah, and it keeps feeding into we don't have to actually have facts. We don't have to actually do anything that's right. We just have to do something that's interesting enough where
people are going to give us money to do it because people are watching.
Correct.
So there's this factory machine between an ad machine for people's eyes to make money off advertisements to sell products.
Yeah.
So there's
Yes.
that aspect to it. Then when it comes to corporate owned media in terms of news, there's that. And that's where
Right.
I'm harping on the media literacy. So
Right. And
I've
that's
explained this
where I think that's where I think like the show Newsroom and stuff like that
is
really
huge.
really did an in-depth job of showing the hypocrisy there for sure.
But you got to think at a point of CNN or Fox News, who are throwing these outrageous spins on. You could watch two different stories on the same subject.
Yep.
And have completely different facts because of the opinionated information in them.
Well, because it's not facts. Yeah.
No.
So we talked about that, and actually, there's a great line in the very first episode of Newsroom where Will McAvoy is talking about people choose the facts they want to hear now when they're talking about how hypocritical, like why when he's talking about like why he has to put on a news show that's interesting and not actually factual. And he's yelling with, Mac, the producer, back and forth about it. He says people choose the facts they want to hear, which is why some people want to watch Fox News or why some people want to watch CNN or something on this side. And then they get to hear what they want to hear and they know it and it's comforting to them, right? And then they get to live in this land where they're correct.
Exactly.
That's honestly, in my mind, what it all boils down to, as opposed to somebody who goes out there and literally just says what is happening. Right?
Why do you think this has been manufactured, though?
Well, again, it's been manufactured because there are these, like, the way that, again, this is my opinion, the way the country is split right now, there isn't a lot of moderates in the country anymore. You know what I mean?
I consider myself one personally, but
me too, right? And again, I think that's the journalist in us, right? But like a lot of people are like the country is very. I agree. The country is very. People say the country is very split right now, and I agree.
It's manufactured that way, though.
Well, again, it's manufactured that way because now Fox News has 80 million people and CNN has 80 million people, and they both get to eat, right? Exactly. Like honestly, the best thing that ever happened to an agency like CNN was Donald Trump becoming president because then they get to rail on everything he ever does, and then people get to watch and be like, "Oh my God, he's so awful! He's so," and that's literally why they turn into the news every day or tune into the news every day. It's because they get to watch, and then their beliefs, like +1, yeah, I agree. It's comforting to them that what they believe is being put on the television.
Yeah. So
and it's aided this massive group of people who don't actually
get anything done.
No, it's not. It's literally like you could just be the White House court reporter, just read through what he does in the day, and people will be like, "That's outrageous. Who could do something like this?" Like, again, whether you agree with the politics or not, they're not actually talking about the issues. They just want to be outraged.
Exactly. So, I'm gonna ask you to put your tinfoil hat on here real quick.
Okay.
So, when I'm saying it's manufactured that way, I don't think, other than they are getting ad revenue and money from getting the eyes.
Yeah.
When we follow the money to who owns each of these news companies.
Oh my God, yeah.
So, why at that point they don't need money? So what is this?
It's not. So for them, it's not about.
No.
It's not about.
If you can, how do you defeat a massive enemy, or how do you keep power? You divide and conquer. So if you can create these two pools that are too busy fighting each other and hating each other, that won't make any progress. They won't come together and compromise on things to make any change. They'd rather just yell at each other.
Correct.
And a stagnant populace. And I think the way corporations deal with Washington in terms of lobbying and such, that's why we're seeing the news how it's calculated today.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. And it's at that point, it's actually not. You're right. It has nothing to do with money for those people. It has everything to do with influence.
Exactly.
And I'm glad you used the word lobby because that's all the news is now. It's just lobbying. It's just honestly The news is the place now. When I was growing up, and I'm not that much older than you, but back in my day, I remember getting phone calls for like polls.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You know why they don't do polls anymore?
They don't
They
need
don't
to.
have to.
Yeah.
They don't have to, because that's literally what the news is every day right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, turn on the news at 5 o'clock today, or turn on the nightly national evening news. They're just polling people, and then the next day, if you watch the news every day for a week, you will see the same story. Obviously, the COVID stuff, but you will see the same story in a different form all 5 days,
Mm-hmm.
based on how the people have responded to the stories. That's not news. That's literally reality television.
Yeah, and that's the sad state and where we're at. We've become our nation. Other than people reaching out trying to make podcasts or having these conversations, which I think more people are having than is given light.
Yes, well, because again, it's not.
They don't want the
gonna,
perception to be that, oh, we're actually together. They want to keep us
correct.
separated.
If we continue to fight over this, right? If the Democrats and the Republicans
Mm-hmm.
continue to fight, then nothing will get done, and you're right, it will stay the same. If you don't have this unifying person.
Mm-hmm.
So what growing up for me, right? When I was born, Reagan was president, but I remember Bill Clinton running in '92,
Mm-hmm.
right, and becoming president. And that was the first presidential campaign that I actually remember, right?
Yep.
And there was all kinds of scandals, and he was, sleeping with this person in this town, and he's a womanizer, he's cheating on his wife, all that. But what he could do better than anybody was walk into a room, and no matter who was in that room, he could walk out and people would be like, wow, this guy has my best interest at heart. Maybe I'll vote for this guy. And it didn't matter where it was.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter if it was in the South, the Northeast, the West, the Midwest. He could just go into a room, tell you what you want to hear, and when he left, you're like, oh, this is a good guy. Like, this is a guy that actually. We don't have people run like that anymore.
No.
That doesn't happen anymore.
And Biden tried to kind of come off that way in his
I think he
speech.
I think he did, but honestly,
it wasn't successful at all.
No,
I didn't think so, at least.
Successful. I don't think he pushed it hard enough, because honestly, and again, my personal opinion, Biden's strategy from the beginning, and I mean, he won, so I guess it worked. But his strategy from the beginning was, I'm not Donald Trump.
Yeah. So
that's been his strategy. And if you even look right at the way the Democratic Party is right now, there are some really, really great candidates out there. Candidates that I believe in.
I think Andrew Yang was my partner. I liked Andrew Yang a lot. Other than
a lot. Actually, I had this discussion with one of my former throwers at my former school.
Really?
He's the exact same. And honestly, I've heard this from 5 or 6 other people too. I'm not there. No. I'm not there at all. No. For me personally, the 2 candidates that I actually were excited the most about, and they weren't, not all of them ran. Stacey Abrams needs to run for president. Mm-hmm. We need to have Stacey Abrams in the White House. She's amazing. She did more for the state of Georgia by losing the governorship in 2018 than anybody's ever done who's won any election. Like, wow. She's the reason Biden got Georgia. If you want to learn about Georgia, if you want to learn about Georgia in this election, Google Stacey Abrams and start reading. She lost the governor. She's a Democrat. She's an African-American woman. Lost the governorship in Georgia by like less than a point. You know how hard that is to do in a place like Georgia? That's like impossible.
Yeah.
In 2018. And then after she lost the election, she didn't stop. She continued to push her ideals through and got voter turnout as high as it's ever been in Atlanta and the cities in Georgia to make sure that it flipped Democrat in 2020. She's amazing. She's great. To me, the other person who doesn't get enough credit too is oh God, why am I blanking on his name? The guy from Texas lost to Ted Cruz.
The African American soldier guy.
No. No, he's a white guy from. Hold on, let me Google it, and then we'll.
There's a guy that I think won I didn't follow up on the race. He was on. I watched Joe Rogan a lot, or at least used to. So he was on Joe Rogan. I forget his name, but he was a
Oh,
military vet.
Beto O'Rourke. That's his name, Beto.
Beto. Okay. I see. I
Beto O'Rourke.
Yeah. I haven't done much research on some of the other people. It was just kind of the main four that I looked into.
Yeah, yeah. But for me personally, right? Like I think that for the future, there are some great candidates
Candidates, yeah.
that are more moderate, not like crazy out to the left or
Yeah.
crazy. Right. I think there are some, but as long as you have big wig Trump out there just scaring people
It's not
into
gonna.
corners,
Yeah.
it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough to run. Like he exposed the weakness in the system that basically is like if you make people run to their corners, they will. Like
Yeah.
they absolutely will.
I think that's a
And
huge point.
like if you push hard enough, they will absolutely tuck tail and run back to where the money is. And for I mean, the Democrats are just as guilty as like they go to where the money is in their party, and that's far far to the left. And the
Mm-hmm.
Republicans, they go far far to the right, and it's scary.
Yeah, it
Like
really is.
there's nothing in the middle anymore.
No, and that's like, yeah, I don't really have much. I think you're completely right. I don't have much to elaborate on that. That's just crazy to really think about. Going back to like how we're separated, um, the sad fate is that most of the populace is, at least the way it's perceived through social media and the way it's presented to us, is from the 90s they've been trying to, we've always been from the 50s we've been trying to become a consumer society completely through the
Yeah,
way corporations have worked. But I feel like we've kind of reached the pinnacle in where we've actually become what's called a dormant consumer, whereas you don't think too much, you just think about getting through your day and buying the new cool thing
and just click.
and click, which
Yeah, I
is
mean
scary, which is a scary, scary reality to me.
it's
That's why
getting
I
easier
think,
to do that,
yeah,
and you just who's made it big since this has all happened. Obviously, a place like Amazon and stuff like that,
yep,
right? Like you just
super
you click,
corporations at this point.
you just click, and then something's at your door the next day or even that day,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it becomes about at that point it becomes about following the money and where can the next buck be made and
Exactly.
where pushing viewership or pushing audience size, basically like how can you get more people to buy into what you are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have to ignore the facts to do that, nobody seems to care.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets scary for me. Like I said, as the guy who the journalist, my journalist brain, basically, that's
Mm-hmm.
where it gets scary for me. And I think about this stuff a lot too. Like, so I have a daughter. She just turned 1 a few weeks ago. And I'm thinking like, obviously we don't know what things are going to be like in 2 months. What's it going to be like in 20 years? Like when my
Yeah.
daughter is getting ready to graduate college, or will there even be colleges at that point? Like the whole college system right now is going to be in flux,
Yeah.
and it's going to be crazy. There's going to be a lot of changes there in the next 5-10 years. Like, what's it going to be like then? Is there going to be even less of this than there is now? Because there's not, in my mind, there's not enough of it.
No.
And how far are we willing to bend as a country, or our ideals before we'll make a change?
Yeah. That's big questions that are hard to be. I think we're looking at a real problem in leadership, and that the funny thing, they'd probably be terrible at actually getting stuff done, but in terms of uniting the populace to
Yeah.
bring a group together as our nation. I heard murmurs of a joke of Dwayne the Rock Johnson and Jocko Willinkins running, an ex-Navy SEAL, and I mean they would probably put together our country as being charismatic and everything. I think it'd be interesting. They wouldn't get jack shit done in the White House, but They could definitely bring
Yeah,
us together.
but there's going to be more of these crazy ideas that get. I mean, every
That actually
time,
might come to fruition.
and I wouldn't put it past anybody at this point, right? Like
Yeah.
we're definitely at the point where every year Kanye and Elon talk about how they're going to run together, and all they have to do is post a picture together, and then everyone's like, "Oh my god, this is amazing! Like this is going
Yeah.
to be."
Which is
It's like
scary.
very.
There's a real reason there is politicians, but there's also very bad politicians.
Oh yeah,
And for people to know what's actually going on, they need to be, as we said, media literate, and they have to be informed by moral media,
yeah,
which we don't really have now, which is scary.
yeah.
Um, we're at about an hour and 40 minutes almost now. There's so much I'd like to continue to talk about, but I don't know if you'd be interested in coming back on, and we can tackle some of the other stuff that we
Sure.
thought about.
Yeah.
But I just
Yeah.
want to hit on a few other things real quick, and we should be done in about 15 minutes.
All right. Well, actually, I got to leave in like 5 minutes to go get my
Okay.
daughter.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
we'll definitely,
All right.
we'll definitely part two.
Yeah, I think that's gonna have to be in order. I had a lot of fun though.
Good. Good.
I hope you had fun too. I'm really
Yeah.
happy you came on. We'd
Yeah.
like to just to give the audience a heads up, if anyone's still watching, hopefully. I'd like to go back to talk about, see what your thoughts on what me and Goylan talked about, and just present to you the idea I put forward in terms of talking about reforming the police and some of the things, because I found yours very interesting, and I agree completely with where you're coming from. I just wanted to show you my side of that. And we also did want to talk about shows, and we can go more in depth with how like the newsroom plays into things. Also, we can talk about other big shows that we've watched, because we both enjoy film and actually have made film stuff before. So
Yep.
all right, perfect. Well, thanks for coming on. As I say to my audience always, balance, love, and respect, and have a good day, guys. Thanks for coming on.
All right. See you, Jimmy.